This is Embassy of the Dead, Chapter 2, The Box. Jake Green was definitely alive. He was alive when he woke up, he was alive all day at school, and he was currently still alive as he trudged his way home through the little village of Elmbury. Being alive was something Jake took for granted. For as long as he could remember, he'd always been that way. Jake found being alive quite easy. All you needed to do was not die. And so far for Jake, that had come naturally. He turned to head up the dark alleyway that cut between the high flint wall and the back of a row of houses. Jake didn't normally come this way. Like a lot of the living, he associated darkness with danger. But it was a shortcut, and the late October sun was already low in the sky, and he was keen to get home. Jake's phone bleeped. He unbuttoned the pocket of his coat and reached inside. It was a message from Sab, his best friend. If Jake was honest, the job of being his best friend wasn't a highly sought-after one, but they'd found a common interest in playing computer games and a common disinterest in studying. They had a mutual respect for each other too. Sometimes that was all you needed. Jake opened the text. "Ready for tomorrow, idiot?" It was the sort of message that was typical of Sab. He was talking about their school trip, 3 days away from home. It sounded all right when you said it like that, but 3 days studying rock formations didn't sound quite as fun. Still, Jake was looking forward to the trip. It would be good to get away from what Sab called his mum and dad situation. It was the only thing Sab didn't make jokes about. Sab knew what it was like. His parents had split up too. It wasn't a common interest as such, more of a shared affliction. Given how things were at home, Jake had jumped at the chance to get away for a while. His suitcase was packed and ready to go, waiting in the spare room at his dad's place. He typed his reply, "Yep." Then, as an afterthought, he added, "Idiot." It was the little details that made their friendship work. The phone bleeped again. "How's it going? Love you, Dad, XX." Jake rolled his eyes. Dad signed all his messages like that, like he was writing a postcard or something, as though he thought Jake wouldn't know who they were from. To say Dad hadn't kept up with the forward progress of mobile technology was an understatement. He preferred old-fashioned things like his camper van. In Jake's opinion, Dad buying the van was when things had started to go wrong. He typed a reply, "You'd know if you still lived with us." Jake's thumb hovered over the send icon, but he knew he wouldn't tap it. He returned the phone to his pocket. There was a quiet rustling sound in the bush. Jake paused as a cat emerged from the shadows. "Hello, cat," said Jake. He'd always wanted a pet, but Mum was too busy to look after one, and Dad probably wasn't responsible enough to have a pet. Jake squatted down and reached out to stroke the cat behind the ears, but it suddenly arched its back and hissed, "It's okay, cat." He moved his hand out of scratching range, then stopped. He looked at the cat. It wasn't hissing at him. It was hissing at something behind him. A chill swept over Jake's body. He had a strange feeling that someone was there. Taking a deep breath, he slowly stood up and turned around. The alleyway was empty. He breathed out heavily. "Stupid cat," he muttered, turning round to continue on his way. But the words caught in his throat, hindered by the fact that he could not close his mouth. Where once the alleyway ahead was clear, now a man, tall, thin and stooping, stood within touching distance, blocking his path. A top hat added to his already looming height, and a tattered black coat flapped behind him in a sudden cold breeze. To Jake he seemed the very picture of what an undertaker should look like, which was A, solemn, and B, wrinkly. Do you know what an undertaker is?
No.
It's the person who's responsible for burying the dead. The man inspected Jake through small, baggy eyes perched closely together over a beak-like nose that, along with his flapping coat and long, thin legs, gave him the appearance of some kind of sinister wading bird. The man took a pocket watch from his waistcoat and inspected it. He frowned and placed the timepiece back into his pocket. And this is what he looked like. "Good morning," he said in a deep voice. Jake blinked. It was the afternoon, maybe even the evening, though he wasn't too sure where one officially ended and the other began. He looked up at the darkening sky. Even if it was morning, it couldn't by any stretch of the imagination be referred to as a good one. He didn't know how to reply, and he definitely didn't want to start a conversation about the correct greeting to use when a person looms out of the shadows to surprise a child in a dark alleyway. Yep, good morning, he croaked, slowly edging backwards, tightening his frightened, sweaty grip on his phone. The man removed his hat to reveal thinning grey hair and a wrinkled brow. He tucked the hat beneath a long arm. Some dirt fell from the brim. You be a little early, but I appreciate punctuality. Pleased to be making your acquaintance, he said, not looking particularly pleased. The name's Stiffkey, but I'm sure you already knew that. He peered at Jake through narrowing eyes. I've a package for you. The man reached into the dark folds of his coat and retrieved a clipboard and pen that he handed to Jake. Jake stared at a form on the clipboard, his brain refusing to read what his eyes could see. You can just mark it with a cross, said the man sternly, if you ain't been sufficiently schooled to read or write. He pointed a long grey finger to a space for a signature, although that would be highly irregular for someone of your position. Jake unhooked the pen. He was standing in a dark alley with the sort of man the phrase, I wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley, was invented for. It was probably best to skip to the end of the form as quickly as possible. He signed his name in an elaborate swirl of letters and loops that was illegible but looked cool. He'd been practicing for when he eventually became famous for something. He blew on the ink and handed the clipboard back to Stiffkey. Stiffkey looked at Jake over the top of the clipboard. A mere child, he said, sighing. No good will come of this. He shook his head slowly and replaced the clipboard in his coat. But no good ever comes from the living meeting the dead. Jake might not have put much effort into staying alive so far, but right now he was conscious of definitely wanting to remain that way. He took a cautious step backwards, preparing to run. Stiffkey stepped forward, stooping until his eyes were inches from Jake's. Once more he reached into the deep folds of his coat and pulled out a package, a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied neatly with twine. He pressed it into Jake's hands. It was surprisingly heavy. Jake blinked and looked up at Stiffkey, unsure of what to do next. Stiffkey's mouth formed a tight smile, almost a grimace, and he breathed in deeply through his nose and then out again. I know you will protect the box and carry out the embassy's orders. To be unburdened of the damned thing after all this time is a relief. I don't mind admitting it. Good luck. He jammed the top hat back on his head and, starting from the hands and nose and working slowly inwards, he faded into nothingness until only a neat pile of freshly dug earth remained. Jake blinked again. Goodbye, Stiffkey, he said quietly and shook his head in disbelief. I have just seen a ghost. Well, what did you think of that chapter?
Well, I thought it was kind of funny at points, but also then when the ghost came, it was like, it's kind of like, it's going to start a very big section in the book, I think.
Do you think Stiffkey really was a ghost? Because he tipped earth from his hat. I mean, Jake thinks he's a ghost. He said it's when the living meets the dead. But does that mean he's a ghost if he's dead and he's got earth, leaving a pile of earth behind him?
Well, maybe he's physical, but he can also be dead.
And so you like the humour?
He's not technically living.
He's not technically living. I think there's a bit of a mystery in this, isn't there? We don't, because in the first chapter they were talking to the body in the coffin, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we've got more to find out about whether that Stiffkey really was a ghost. And he's wearing quite funny clothes as well, isn't he? Wearing a top hat. Do people wear a top
That-
hat these days?
No.
So
Not that I know.
So, and it looks like he's wearing a kind of tailcoat, a frock coat. So that might mean he's from quite a long time ago.
Mhm.
I wonder whether we'll meet Stiffkey again.
Probably.
Yeah, I think we'll have to find out. And the next chapter, which we will read in the next instalment, is called The Finger. Right, that's it for now.